please help me welcome our speaker, Amber Watts? Amber is the founder and CEO of Radical Growth Works, and we are so happy to have her with us today. So, Amber, the session is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Casey. Great to have all of you today. I did see a few people close to home for me. I am based out of Omaha, Nebraska, and yes, this was a nice, easy transition to be able to say to bring in one of my favorite movies into what I love and what I do in my professional life. So today we are going to be talking a lot about onboarding, right? That's the whole purpose. Like, what are we doing that is impacting why people are leaving, whether it's voluntary or involuntary? So we are going to be talking about those two different pieces today. And we're going to talk about how to just avoid some of those mistakes and then what you can do about them. And I'm really big on providing actionable strategies. So, like, what can you do today versus long term as well? All right. So, a little bit about me, sharing both professionally and personally. So, I do have a book coming out on this topic from onboarding to everboarding, redefining employee development. That is coming out September 23rd. So, very soon. So, it is available for pre order on Amazon. You will be getting this deck. The links will be in there. You can also find me on LinkedIn and find the link as well. But just a little bit about me outside of that. I've had a very different journey where I've had to hold two different hats. I call myself a hybrid. A lot of times I was enablement when it didn't exist, even though I was hired for talent development. And if I was hired for talent development, really focused on talent management, I spent a lot of time in the enablement function as well because I grew up in sales initially. And I've been a sales manager and a chief revenue officer as well. Currently, I am also at LinkedIn. I am a performance consultant there. So I sit with their senior leaders to help them identify areas of improvement in things like performance and then helping them lead through change as well. I do have my own company, as Casey did mention, where I have called Radical Growth Works because ultimately, to me, that's what everboarding is. It is a lever for growth in the organization. We're not just focusing on learning and performance. All right. So today's agenda, I really just want to start off with just understanding what is the problem? Like, what is causing this early new hire turnover? There's a lot of statistics out there that keep seeming to change. Gallup has some great data on it. SHRM is always a great resource. So I'm going to avoid using and quoting some of those sources just because there is a lot of different ones out there, and I'll let you, form your own conclusions of what your company uses or who you trust from a source standpoint. Then we're going to get into those 10 critical mistakes. I'm going to talk a little bit about what everboarding is, because it is not a continuation of onboarding. It's deeper than that. And then again, some actionable strategies you can take both short term and long term. So we are going to start it off with a poll. So I want to know, just to set the tone for today, what is your biggest challenge with onboarding and retention at your organization? And so these are the most popular ones. If you don't see something there, there is an other option. Can you please drop it in the chat and let all of us know outside of this list where your biggest challenge with onboarding and retention is? And I will be keeping an eye on the chat as Casey keeps an eye on Q&A. Oh, well, thanks for the honesty, Brittany. That's reality in some organizations right now. We're all still feeling the ripple effects of the world changing. There's always so many external factors that are impacting this. Okay, so results. It looks like the top result is managers aren't reinforcing training or development. And then coming in second is this onboarding feels disjointed or consistent, which is typically what I hear and see. If I had to have predicted what your two biggest qualms probably were, biggest challenges, those are the ones that I hear most often. And my book addresses both of those challenges. I actually have a whole section just devoted to how do we get more managers more involved in early on and then ongoing, and how to support them. So perfect. Yep. Thanks for sharing. Definitely more than one. Yeah, Alexandra brings out such a great point. Like, depending on the line of business, and again, it kind of goes back to managers, right? What is that culture within that line of business or that organization within the organization? All right. So, our first topic today is just getting into understanding the problem of early new hire turnover. I am going to ask you for your opinions or just like a thumbs up as I go throughout in the chat. Since I can't see you, I do want to make sure that I understand what's resonating and what's happening in your org. So we think about what are the problems of early new hire turnover. And this, like I said, could be a result of both voluntary and involuntary. Maybe they just weren't the right fit for the role and they identified that early on themselves. That's always a possibility too. So frequency and cost of early departures. This stuff is going to feel a little bit more obvious. These are the things that you all are probably already hearing. Your senior stakeholders are already mentioning to you, and you're going to see a lot of this out there as well in your network on LinkedIn. But high early turnover when they leave within those first few months is how I'm defining that. Every country even handles this differently. If you work in a global org, early turnover means something different than maybe to your North American offices. Sometimes there's a 30-day probationary period in North America versus maybe your European and APAC counterparts. But the things that it's going to impact and it creates a challenge is that company brand and then talent acquisition as well. So, if you also think about what are some of the other things that happen, direct financial costs. Your CFO is probably very aware of this. That's usually why your CHRO and your CFO are in lockstep. And then lastly, what maybe people aren't considering is just productivity, because what it does is it creates low morale on the team. If the team is experiencing new employees or new teammates so often, think about what that does for them. They start to get a little anxious. Should I really devote time to helping this person? Because I don't know if they're going to be here very long. So this starts to create some disengagement and some disconnection at the team level as well. Oop, I apologize. I just talked with my hands there too much. All right. So moving on to the next piece here. The things that you don't hear about as often is impact on that organizational culture and productivity. We all know that there's financial costs. We all know that people are going to leave early and it's going to impact our training programs. Talent acquisition is going to be working twice as hard. However, if we think about just back to what I said about the team, think about the disruption that that's doing, that morale, that productivity. And then ultimately, the employer's reputation is impacted. So think about your TA team, again, working twice as hard. Marketing is probably involved as well. And when people start to leave the company that often, that's when you start to see those glass door notifications popping up. They start making it into the news for not good publicity. And unfortunately, not all publicity is good publicity. There are times when your employer does not want to be mentioned and found for a poor reputation. Is this resonating with you? Is this something that your organization has top of mind? That employer reputation impact one is not something I hear a lot when I first work with clients. They're not worried about that as much. They're more worried about cost. Yeah, I'm getting some thumbs up. Oh, temps and the holidays, turnover is high. Yep, I've worked with some companies like that. I've been in that environment myself. That is hard to predict from time to time. Yep, it just dismissed it all. Yeah, always cost. Yep. But there is cost in if you're not getting top talent because they're seeing negative reviews, there's cost in that too. All right. So if you think about getting really more specific into the onboarding pitfalls, and these are going to be very general up front, and then we're really going to break it down into what we could be doing differently. So, number one, when I first start talking to organizations, these are the things that I want to know up front because these are typically why onboarding fails. Number one is poor communication. It's going to lead to confusion and disengagement. Can you imagine being a new hire? And I'm sure you can. You come into an organization, you're talking to the talent, the recruiter that brought you on, then you come in and you meet the L&D or maybe the HR team if you have true orientation. And then you have your manager, sometimes you have a mentor, you have a team lead. Can you imagine if all five of those people are giving you a different story about policies, role expectations? And this is a very common thing. Um, and then we get into those expectations. They were told one thing about goals, and then someone on the team's like, oh, yeah, that's going to change. It's like there's just this big disconnect. Then we move into insufficient training. So, and I'm curious, and please put this in the chat. This is a question I always like to ask. When is the last time that you reviewed and updated your onboarding program? Every, so once a year. Okay, it's the end of the year, once a year. Awesome. And then Laura, make sure you switch that over to everyone because only I saw that response. 2 years doing it right now, every quarter, every fall, once a year, last week, normally 6 months. Yeah, every organization's a little bit different. And if we think about how often things are changing in our organization, is the onboarding keeping up with that? Are we going back and updating as things are evolving? Sometimes it's external factors, sometimes it's a very individual line of business. What if the hiring persona has shifted? I'm going through that right now at my org where we are going to be hiring differently maybe than we have in the past. We're looking for a different type of talent, different type of skill set because the world is evolving. Is our onboarding going to meet the mark? Because our onboarding should be tailored to the persona that we're bringing in, right? And give me a thumbs up if you agree with that statement. And if, okay, an upcoming project. It depends how frequently you hire, Eileen. That's a great call out. Awesome. And then lastly, this weak team connection. If everyone, if you're familiar with it, there is that Tuckman's model out there, right? The forming, storming, norming, performing. And when we talk about team integration and building that up, if people are turning over consistently, we're constantly in the forming and storming phases, and nobody is earning their paycheck, and the team is feeling the brunt of that and working very lean. All right, I'm going to pause, make sure there's no questions thus far, Casey.
Nope, we're all good for the time being.
Perfect. All right. All right, so let's get into these 10 critical mistakes that are going to drive new hires away. And we're going to count down going backwards. And as you see these, go ahead and give me either a thumbs up or a thumbs down if this is something that you're either experiencing or not experiencing. This is what I've found in my own personal research. Number 10, there is a messy handoff between the recruiter and the manager. Again, when I first start working with clients, the first thing I do is I start at day zero. What is happening before they even start on day one? Does the manager know exactly what they need to do? Is their area clean and ready to go if they're coming in person? When I used to prepare onboarding, I actually had Clorox wipes as part of my budget because they should come into a clean desk, right? But if even bigger than that, was the recruiter able to effectively articulate what was going to happen on day one? Does the manager know that they have somebody starting? Do they remember? There's a lot of clunkiness between offer accepted and day one that happens in organizations. And there's, again, a lot of confusion. One of the things that is like the biggest impact, and it's so small, is the employee knowing what to wear on day one. Again, if they are in person or even virtual, we sometimes forget that people want to know what's acceptable, even in a virtual environment. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to start a job wondering, can I wear that baseball cap? I'm normally in a baseball cap, except when I do webinars. And then when I'm in front of my senior stakeholders, it's who I am. But is that the culture at this organization? There's always that hesitancy. Something as simple as communicating the dress code at their location or their team can go a long way. And if it has to be surfaced from a manager, great. But that is just one example of just a big disconnect. Yeah, they don't read the communication from HR. So, what is HR doing to ensure that they have acknowledged it and are prepared? Yeah, it's an entry level role. That's totally fair too. So who owns that problem, right? Does the manager own it? And that's just something that the organization has to consider, and it's unique to your business. All right, number 9. Give me a thumbs up if this is something happening in your org, or a thumbs down if not. So um, there's no clear schedule for day one. Day one to me is like this: if you own onboarding or you care about onboarding in your role or you're a part of it, that is your Super Bowl. Every day after day one is just like regular season schedule. So your day one for a new hire, there should be clear structure of what they're doing and when, hour by hour, who's showing up, who's passing the baton. If you're very HR orientation heavy on day one, and some companies are, then what happens after that? Should the manager be aware that they weren't able to get into workday? Should the manager be aware that they couldn't perhaps log their time? If they couldn't, they didn't have a chair available. They're whatever it is, it's that handoff that has to happen after day one. But the manager should also know what they're doing, because they should be showing up to say hello. If the manager is responsible for it, are we preparing them? My personal philosophy is, I don't care where you're from, what you've had in the past. Everybody gets set up for success the same way. You come in with a blank slate, and that day one should look the same for everyone that you're hiring. And then lastly is just coming back to like setting the tone. If day one's messy, they're going to question their decision in joining your organization. And day one should be affirming them that they made the right choice. It's not uncommon for people to have been interviewing with multiple companies, to have a terrible day one, and go back and say, you know what, I'm going to take that offer with this other company after all. It happens. Let me read this. So Rebecca says, we started something new for training. Wow, we started sending out bios and intro emails for day one. I think that's perfect. It's a great way to welcome them to the team, and start to integrate them, and for everybody to come say hello or respond to it. It makes them feel special, and everyone should feel special on their first day. Okay, I'm just reading through. IT, IT, IT. I wish I could have a whole session on, like, if anybody's familiar with journey mapping or product, if you've worked with product before in a tech environment, they're really big on journey mapping. I believe in doing that for HR as well, because IT, sometimes it's like we just assume they're doing things and then we find out they're not. So I love the IT call outs, and it's not IT's fault. They just aren't in lockstep with L&D and HR. Remote was terrible. Yes. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So we're getting into number 8. So thumbs up or thumbs down. Is this something that your organization does or doesn't have as a challenge? So information overload and there's no context. Meaning, are we bombarding them with info to new employees that's really excessive, but we're not actually explaining the relevance? And it's really hard for them to absorb it and then apply it. A big one is the org structure. Have you ever walked into an organization or had new hires even tell you, okay, I thought it was one way and then I got in here and that is not at all what it was? There's this weird disconnect between how it gets described, how people interpret it, and then what they actually experience. If the manager isn't the point person for questions, the new hire needs to know who is. Assigning one person or mentor, yup, who can answer those questions is valuable, so that it doesn't exactly. Gail, I love that you said the last part here. If it doesn't feel like a burden, that psychological safety has to start on day one too. If you think about like your company's core values, are those being demonstrated on day one? And if there's anything in there about, we help, we serve, we're a team, but then people don't feel comfortable coming and asking questions as a new employee, that goes against the core values. So how are the core values showing up on on their first day? Yeah, managers want them ASAP. Oh, Shelly, we could have a whole session on that entirely. And sometimes I don't have that answer. Yeah, yeah, that absolutely. Again, it's bringing everybody together and having that plan, that journey map of that handoff, having that seamless transition. Perfect. All right. Heading into the next one here. So, thumbs up or thumbs down? Neglecting personal connection. I saw somebody already called out, yeah, we do an intro on day one. I have an island here as a visual for a reason. I don't ever want a new hire to feel like they come into the office and they get put in a corner just to watch videos. And then they go to lunch, but and then they show up to the lunchroom and there's nobody to sit with. Perhaps they are feeling like, gosh, what I'm working on has not anything to do with what the team even does. So again, it goes back to that context a bit. But they should be introduced to the team, whether that's day one or week one. And they should know the people who are going to be there to support them, right? White glove onboarding. Oh, I love that, Laura. I've heard the term like rolling out like the red carpet for new hires. Absolutely. And then like the lunch thing, again, whether they're remote or in person, they should feel included in some way, whether that's just a gift card even getting sent to them. But who owns that? Is that the manager? Is that HR? And really defining that. But rapport is again going to help them confirm their feelings of, I made a good choice in joining this organization. I actually had a client that I was working with not that long ago who shared with me that they did like half day onboarding and then they were just kind of put out there to go watch videos and that they had a lot of new hires on their survey saying, "You know what? I wish I could have gotten to talk to my team more. Or I wish my manager was around more in my first week." And they had no idea because everything was happening so much at the team level. So, made the change and it had a drastic impact, but just one small change of setting up that lunchtime. All right, moving on to number 6. So this one's a big one. Managers are not engaged early, and I'm gonna ask this a little bit differently. Give me a thumbs up if you have managers involved in a as a partner in their onboarding, meaning there is an ebb and flow of L&D or HR, whatever it is to your business, and with the manager. Like there is a unique partnership that is occurring where they're both enabling and helping that new hire. And we'll just say week one. So give me a thumbs up if that is happening. Give me a thumbs down if there's just an opportunity to be doing that better. Okay. Seeing some. Yeah, Alexandra. So such a good point. It really does vary. Every team, there are some teams who just do it super well. Rebecca, no. Okay. So as I mentioned, in my book, I do have a whole section on this about how we should be or could be supporting managers when a new employee joins the organization. So every organization handles this very differently, and I will try to speak more broadly about this. But whether it is a simple 30-minute check-in to ask how their first week was, and a 30-minute check-in on day one to welcome them to the team, or it's intros to teams, or hey, I want to make sure I saw that you didn't get the benefits link. I wanted to make sure you knew who to contact. Like involvement could be that simple all the way up through I am leaning in week one to assist with some very role specific training, or I'm going to introduce them to someone and we're going to have a conversation with them together to get them integrated into a project, whatever it may be. Think about what that needs to be, but as at the minimum, they should be seeing them on day one and at the end of their first week for a formal check in um, so they feel supported. Because really, what happens is if they don't start building that up front, that just delays that relationship and manager to employee relationship, and they need that in order to be coached and developed effectively, right? And they also need to feel like they can go to their manager with questions and they're not bothering them in any way. So I'm going to read this comment quick from Rebecca. My nightmare when I first came on as a temp at my company, no manager or supervisor contacted me or talked to me. I still worked hard regardless, but it was hard. Yes, it was heartbreaking. Um, think about if you think about what onboarding or even ongoing development, everboarding does, it creates engagement. It's yes, it's a growth lever in the organization, but that sets the stage for immediate engagement and long-term engagement. And if somebody is coming in and they feel like nobody cares to offer help and they're just expecting you to come to them for help, that is going to fail time and time again. True leaders make themselves available. They don't wait to be made available. And give me a thumbs up if you agree with that or not. But just a simple question, and I work with my managers on these things often, is just, hey, making sure that you're going and saying, how can I help? What can I help with? What do you need from me? Something as simple as that. How, instead of just, hey, how's it going? That's too surface level. They need to be more intentional about, I'm here for you and I have time. I am making the time. And that could just be not typing during a one-on-one. It could be pushing away from their desk when they're approached in person. It's physically making yourself available to them, not just saying it. People are rude. Well, we could talk about that for a while too. Yes, we can't always pick who our leaders are that we get to partner with, right? Okay, moving into number 5, and I brought this up front because I am really big on communication and making sure we're all rowing in the same direction, but that inconsistent communication is a top 5 that I come across in organizations where there are giant and small gaps in communication across teams. If you think about it, and if you'd like, you can put this number in the chat, but think about how many different teams are involved in a new hire starting at your organization. I can name off a few right away: HR, IT, marketing, because maybe they need business cards. Then you've got L&D if they are a separate function. You could think about finance with approving their pay salary and sending out that offer letter. If you think about all of that, um, and then you also then have to think about the team that they're going to, right? So that might be 5, 6, 7 different teams that are involved in just getting somebody started. So you can imagine the amount of gaps that there are potentially for miscommunication or communication. Don't forget about vendor B2B contacts. Absolutely. Yeah, good call out. So if you think about that, that's the number of people that if you want to get better at this, you have to find a way to bring all of those individuals together and understand their process. How do you know when to go request equipment for a new hire? Oh, I get the workday task. Another company might say, oh, we send it to the hiring manager. They have to say what type of equipment they need, and then they have to contact IT. So like there's already potential miscommunication right there. And what if the manager, the hiring manager forgets and they send it 3 days before someone starts? That's not enough time for IT to turn that around and get equipment potentially. So that's where some of those gaps can start to occur. Then there's role uncertainty. So if it's a new role or you're in a hyper growth organization, I'm working with a client who did an audit where there were 12 different roles in one org. And by the way, there was only 100 people in this org, in this one line of business, I should say. There were 12 different roles. And once they did the audit and they realized, okay, there's actually only 3 roles on this team. Okay. So that created a lot of role uncertainty because there were people with different titles doing the exact same things. And that happens a lot in hyper growth organizations or acquisitions that occur, mergers, etc. And then lastly, getting into just lack of updates. So I'm curious if you have to, in your organization, report on new hire metrics and to whom you report them to. Do you have to give progress updates? Do you have to say, we're at the end of week 2 for this cohort, everybody's on track? Ryan says no, not required. Is there any value add in communicating these to hiring managers and saying, hey, compared to the rest of the cohort, they seem to be doing awesome. Like, hey, let me give you some side by side comparisons. Oh, interesting, Alexandra. There's only metrics for sales and CS. Okay, and there's a promotion. Yay, that's exciting. You're bringing a new level of insight to the business. What a great place to be. I love that. All right, let's get into number 4. These are getting more and more interesting as we go. At least I hope they are for you. But the top um 4 for me of like what I see in organizations is they ignore feedback from new hires. How many of you actually have a survey that goes out to new hires within their first week, first 3 weeks, let's say? Yes, yes. And most companies do, right? You want to ask. I see so many different variations of what that is. Some of it is, hey, did you get your equipment on time? So we're really getting into, did IT do their job? Did the hiring manager do their job? Did you get swag like you were supposed to? Did you observe any of these core values in action? If so, maybe give an example. Okay, 30, 60, 90. That's such a good or such a common one, right? We want to know what those different milestones. So what I often see though is we go collect this feedback and then we don't do anything with it other than maybe improve the content, or we make a change to when we release a lesson, or we start we serve different food on day 1 because of dietary restrictions. It's usually like very, very basic stuff. Otherwise it gets pushed onto the team that we feel they're responsible for it. And what I would suggest, or what I do suggest, is you actually have time set aside and there's a review group. And I always say, who should receive the feed? Or I always get the question, who should receive the feedback? Who should receive the survey? It's whoever cares about the problem and is going to take on implementing change. So if your team is not able to make changes to the IT process, then you bring IT into the conversation to help them change the process, right? But there always needs to be some sort of review cycle around this feedback. So that way it's intentional and you have a strategic leader, a part of the conversation that says, these are the big rocks and these are things that I need to escalate. And in order to move things, because otherwise, if you get into the habit of asking for feedback and then new hires don't see a change or they don't feel heard, they're going to continue to not fill out or provide feedback moving forward, like your annual engagement surveys. They're going to lose trust that the organization is listening, especially your team if you're the ones asking for it. Okay, I want to read a couple of these comments. What are we are small, just 60, so I have a chat with everyone. I love that. That personal, I think firsthand feedback is great, especially if you're going to establish that trust with them up front of you can bring that to me. And I care about it and I will bring it to the attention of those who can make said change. And then Rebecca says, but the training team, we take surveys during training to improve training for the next season. Yeah. Um, yes, I think new hire companies are going to continue to invest in onboarding. Absolutely. That's where you're going to see that. So that makes sense. Every week for the first 30 days, in-person group of new hires. Ooh. Dave, I love that. I think you have to stay in lockstep with people to make sure they're staying on track and that nobody's dropping the ball. So I do like the once a week approach in the first 30 days. I do recommend it, but not every company is able to adapt that. So or adopt that. What did you actually use from new hire training on the job? Ooh, I like that one too. Of hey, of all the things that you learned, what did you actually get to go apply? And then you can start to see maybe where you need to lean in or lean out. Okay, we're getting into top 3 now. Um, Training without application. My heavy sales background, absolutely. This is an area where it is kind of a lot easier to apply things. Now, where I work now with LinkedIn, the support environment, it's much harder, right, to create those real life scenarios. So, but this is something I hear from a lot of organizations is, well, we delivered the e-learning, we delivered the training at mass or at large, and we don't know other than maybe a multiple choice assessment whether or not they applied it. Um, Multiple choice has a time and place. I don't personally believe it belongs in any type of training that is practical application because multiple choice gives you assumed competency. It doesn't give you confirmed competency. Training application is what gives you confirmed competency. And this might be where you could pull the manager in or a mentor in for them to even do some like skills practice or role play. I like to call it skills practice. But you can bring them in to get to get them used to receiving feedback from those individuals anyway, but also just for sure if they were able to apply it. I see some hearts, some claps. Yeah, if you agree with that statement, I'd love for you to put a reaction in there. Because if they don't get to practice it and you throw them into the real world environment or you just make them shadow, we all know if they shadow, they're not always going to see all the things we want them to see. It's just going to reduce their confidence. They need a place to practice it and it's up to us to figure out how can we design that experience for them. Some are much trickier than others. Okay, hold on. Let me read these. It's tough. We're in a complex industry where the training ramp for many positions is long because the stakes for performance are super high. Absolutely, Ryan. I had a client where well, I don't want to call it onboarding. We'll say ramp was 12 months. And so we instituted more of like a milestone approach where it's not that they were being assessed like pass fail. I don't really believe in pass fail. Unless it's really, really high stakes environments, maybe what you're describing, where it's like people's lives are on the line. But they got to like practice something over and over before they got to go do the assessment that counted. And I think that's what's important. And it's a more of a milestone approach and kind of like what the Alexandra said here, see one, do one. And so it's just learn it, see it, do it, come back and let's talk about it. I would love to elaborate more on that though, if you want to connect outside of this webinar. I can share what that company did. All right. No clear career path is number two. And you might be thinking, okay, it's day one or it's week one, it's onboarding. Why does anybody need to have visibility into a career path? This creates long term engagement. This creates a vested interest in staying with the organization. They can envision their future more vividly. I think career path transparency is something that not a lot of companies have in place today, is what I'm finding. Lots of them are working toward it, or they're leaning on managers to go have the conversation. So if you don't have it is a big undertaking, and I totally understand that. So if you don't have the resources to pull it off, it might be more of an approach of educating your managers to have these types of conversations and make sure that they're aware of roles within the organization, how to create new skills, or at least give, and when I say create new skills, maybe they've identified something in the organization where there is a gap. So that manager can identify the gap, make a recommendation, and then if their employee would be a good fit, how can we guide them toward that? So this really does come into more of like a performance management. Um, yeah, no, it's a huge problem. So if you put yourself in the new hire's shoes or just any employee at the organization, they need to be able to see two things. Number one is the linear path for their current role. And the second thing is what are some lateral movements that others have taken? Usually that's legacy knowledge that a manager just has to share, or a mentor. But then there's also being able to have visibility into job descriptions of roles within the organization. So is there skills that fall under those job descriptions? Do they know what skills their role requires and how that compares to this lateral move? Um, it's going to help keep them motivated. It's going to help them be working toward developing skills that are going to set them up for future roles. Yeah, and again, it's a big undertaking. I think the small things that you can do up front, though, is more coming straight to those middle managers or frontline managers as well, and getting in front of them and helping develop that muscle for them around career conversations. I actually have a whole framework that I usually share as well. Um, and if anybody wants it, I can send it to you, but I call it brew. It's a brew framework, but it's a nice little like cyclical cycle of like when to talk about those things with employees. All right. I'm gonna pause before I get to number one and see if there's any questions that have come through, Casey.
No questions yet, but there's still time, y'all.
Yeah, no worries. I feel like we're doing a lot in the chat right now, so this is good. Um, I want to, everybody's kind of adding in. Yeah, if you want to message me directly, or Casey, I might be able to just like, it's not a part of the presentation, so I hate to add a new resource. This is kind of this is how I do things though, like in the moment. Um, It's definitely an issue, and you're not alone. This is why it's the second biggest issue that I come across. It is something that I'm hearing larger enterprise orgs tackling. But if you're a smaller company and you can get in front of it now, imagine how much smaller of a lift that is versus you being like a 20,000 person company and trying to implement something like this. So, as strong headwinds can make things financially unclear for many firms, even large firms. So new talent is always willing to move on quickly. Yep. Stackable learning, upskilling, those are all very necessary. Okay, how can we get buy-in from managers to make changes? Our L&D team collects feedback and shares it after each class, but it usually ends there. What are effective ways that we can push for actual change? Alyssa, yours went to just the hosts and panelists, just FYI, if you want to toggle to everyone. But I'm going to answer your question around how do you get buy-in? So buy-in comes from a bottoms up approach and a top down approach. So you almost have to create ambassadors or fans of what you're providing. And if you can find one person who is like a go to on the team that can say, like, rally behind you, that's always an effective way. That's influence, right? And getting them to like be a testimonial, speak on your behalf, even in rooms that you're not in. But it also really comes down to, and I share this a lot with my team, which is, did the manager have a voice in it? Oftentimes it's usually just a lack of, I don't want to say trust, but it could be lack of trust, could be lack of credibility. They don't know what you can do for them. And so we often have to go and have that conversation around just, what would you have done differently with this? Or what do you think is missing from this? What support are we not providing you to develop your employees today? Like, and just letting them be brutally honest. And you don't have to agree with everything. First of all, people want to feel heard. Second of all, if it's directly impacting the success of their employee, you don't own the success of their employee, the manager does. And so they're going to go rogue if they feel like it isn't, if it's missing the mark at all. And in order to reduce that, it's a very candid conversation of what would you have done differently, and maybe even involving them in some of the creation. So I know that was like a very, very loaded answer. There's a lot of different ways. It depends on what the root cause is and just that friction. Why are you resisting these changes? Help me understand why you don't see the value in this. But as soon as you can get a pilot group and have a success story to say, well, look how much they've improved, a lot of times, numbers talk, money talks. Yeah, recrafting career paths, absolutely. We're in a government healthcare agency. Yep, working in silos. Any suggestions on? So, okay, so work the silos piece. That's if you have anybody who's in a role where they're responsible for cross-functional partner collaboration or sharing, I would find them, lean on them. If you have anybody in like a strategy and ops type role that could help you with like, how could we roll out something like this? Knowing that they're all working in silos and they do their own messaging, try to find your partners in the organization that can help up here to, again, it's that top down approach. When I say a bottoms up approach, again, it's those people who care about it that aren't a senior stakeholder to you, but they might be a mobilizer. And that's more of a sales term. But there's somebody who can create the excitement in your organization around it. But find your cross functional partners who are responsible for that type of sync, or strategy and ops, a lot of times can help with that. All right. So, last one. When I come into, again, working with a new client, Day 1 always seems to be where we spend a lot of time, and I'm using the term onboarding very loosely here when I say single day onboarding, because truly, if you're just doing 1 day of onboarding, it's more of an orientation, or you're in a role, or you're hiring for roles like in the hospitality industry. Do they really need more than a day 1? It might be 1 to 3 days. I totally understand that every role requires extreme extensive onboarding. But if we're really only just focusing on day 1, I called it our Super Bowl earlier, and it is, but that's just setting the tone for what's to come. It's not a wipe our hands of it and be done. Everybody is so obsessed with having everything prepared for that first day that we're not thinking about how do we continue that awesome experience throughout the rest of the week or the coming month or the coming months. And if we're only focused on getting the boxes checked, like getting their I-9 completed, or we're just trying to stay compliant, we're missing the big picture. Onboarding is really about acclimating them to the company, acclimating them to the culture, creating experiences for them to feel welcome, feel relevant and valued. And it's less about knowledge dump. Knowledge dump, if in an ideal world, I would love to say for week 2. Week 1 is really just know who you go to for what, know who you can lean on, know who to go to questions for, and get to know your team and start to build those relationships loosely. Big culture shift for some. All right. Moving into the next section here. So, getting into like what on everboarding means to an organization. So, I already talked about day 0 being more important than I think we give it credit for, and like not thinking about that, how that like sets the tone for any onboarding. So we need to be in lockstep. We all need to know what each other ate for lunch, right? Anybody who's involved with getting somebody started for day 1. But everboarding goes beyond that. Everboarding is setting, or I'm sorry, onboarding is setting the stage. It is the launch phase of everboarding. And then within my book, I actually have 3 phases. I'll quickly tell you. Number 1 is onboarding, and I talk a lot about talent acquisition and pre-boarding in there. Number 2 is your development phase. So I actually have a physical baton. I ordered a few of these, but onboarding is carried, the baton is carried by HR, training, L&D, whomever. And that is your launch phase. Does not mean manager is not involved. Manager is involved. They just aren't they're not the one carrying the baton. And that timeline looks different for each organization. So once onboarding, more meaning they spend more time in like formal learning, formal training, and it shifts more to informal, more coaching, more team acclimation. The manager gets passed the baton. They are now the ones leading that. And then once they get to a point where that employee is gaining autonomy, they are earning their paycheck, right? That ROI, they've acclimated to the team. They now are a self led learner. And so we pass the baton to the employee because at this point, they should know where their gaps are. Where do they go to for information? Who do they go to? And we want them to own their development. But the only way to do that is that seamless transition. And we are setting the stage. Who here, and you can agree or disagree. Remember, these are some of this is my opinion, some of this is just my experience. I've stopped graduating new hires. You do not get a certificate at the end of onboarding unless it's around a product or a process. But you don't graduate because now I'm saying you're good to go. You don't need anything else. You're on your own. And then if we want them to come back and absorb more learning, but we just told them they're graduated and they're good and they're self-sufficient, I feel like we're sending mixed messages. Give me a thumbs up if you agree that graduating new hires is like a sign of mastery and it shouldn't be. And give me a thumbs down if you disagree, but just tell me why. And that's okay. These are just, again, my perspectives and my experiences. And also, managers. Managers are like, they graduated. Why do they need to do more? Oh man. So that's where I got rid of graduation as soon as I had a manager say that to me. Yeah, you don't get a you're here to learn, and that's okay. We don't expect mastery and perfection. So, how does everboarding improve your retention and engagement? Absolutely, Robert, and I agree. It's a matter of message delivery and culture. Yep. For me, it was as soon as I had that manager say, "Well, they graduated, they don't need anything else." That's where I flipped it. So you're right. It is more of a culture thing. Yep. And sales and CS. Oh, Alexandra, you and I could talk about that all day. I have a different way of approaching my sales teams around milestone certifications instead of graduations, which happy to chat. They don't deserve that title. Well, all right. These are great. I love the comments. So, but yes, back to everboarding, how it improves in retention and engagement. Number one, just that consistent communication. It's going to develop trust and confidence in your new hire. It's going to develop credibility. It's almost like when you go to a business and you submit a service request and you're saying, "Gosh, this is broken. I need help." And then you get reached out to by someone else saying, "Hey, we'd love to sell you this." And you're like, "But I came to you for this. Why are you trying to sell me something? This isn't even resolved." It's the same thing with somebody joins an organization. They hear one thing from one person. Next thing you know, someone else is like, "Hey, by the way, we still need your I-9." You're like, "I did that like 3 weeks ago when I started." That inconsistent communication can really put somebody in a place of distrust and wondering if the company has their ducks in a row. Um, the second one being personal connection. Again, onboarding really should be about creating those connections, building those relationships. The knowledge comes second to that because if somebody is integrated into the culture, they're going to be more engaged and willing to learn and apply. Doesn't mean you deprioritize and you spend weeks just talking about culture. It just means focus on that first, focus on the experience, and then knowledge is a secondary priority in that thinking. And then the last one is just that development opportunities, which I'm going to give you some examples. So I'm going to skip ahead here. If you want to implement more of an everboarding concept in your organization, here are some things you can think about. Number one is more of a structured touch point design. I also call this more of like systems thinking. Like, how do those interactions, who's involved throughout their employee life cycle, throughout that journey? Manager training, equipping them with skills and knowledge so they can actually support employees. One on one structures, one on one guides, manager toolkits. Does the manager know where to direct them, or did they save an old PDF instead of using the most updated one? Um, Leveraging technology. We have a huge AI push going on in a lot of orgs right now. How are we supporting both your new hire, current employees, and managers to lead through that? And then lastly is collecting that new hire feedback. Figure out where you can make the biggest impact right away. All right. So I promised you some actionable strategies. We've had a lot of things going on in the chat. So I'm going to just jump right into this. I feel like we've been addressing questions and comments along the way. So here's your quick wins. Okay. If you were to walk away today, here are the things that maybe you could implement if you're not already or enhance. Number one is that clear first day agenda and sending that out to the new hire before they even start. So they know exactly what their first day looks like and they come in less anxious and ready to I don't want to say hit the ground running, but ready to connect and observe and be willing to absorb new information. Day one is exhausting. Second thing would be assigning mentors. One of the things I talk about in my book, which originally was like a subsection, and I wrote so much, my editor said, "I think this deserves its own chapter." And I was like, "I'm really passionate about mentors." Um, there's two types of mentors. There's performance focused mentors and then there's buddies. So a performance focused mentor is somebody, again, you'll see it a lot in like sales and CS, but any role can have one. And they are helping reinforce what they've learned week by week. And they're providing that feedback then to training and the manager to say, "Hey, here are the things they did really well. Here are some areas that I think they could really still use some help in." A buddy mentor is more of a culture add, that person you can go to for questions, and they can be really in any role in the company for the most part, right? They're just there for like a culture component. The next one is regular check-ins. So Really, that could be the HRG, an HR generalist. It could be the HR business partner. It could be the manager. It could be L&D or enablement. There needs to be check-ins owned by the different functions in order to ensure that they're staying on track. Everybody's going to be looking at different data sets and signals of, is the new hire doing the right thing at the right time? Are they regressing? And that's going to come from those regular check-ins and getting that firsthand feedback. I don't remember who said it, but you had said that you actually meet with them in the first 30 days to get feedback. And I think that's great. That's a great example of a check-in, but encouraging managers to be doing it as well. All right. And then these are the long-term pieces. Leadership training, whether that's emerging leaders, whether that's them. Is there, an executive track? These are all bigger lifts. And then thinking about manager levels as they go. What types of things can they apply for, whether that's internal or external? And then the emerging one really does help retain employees. Second one is those career development programs. So this is beyond leadership. This is things like getting really into EQ even. This could be upskilling. Maybe it's for IT or engineers. And we send them to go get a certificate outside the org. AI, I'm going to go back to it. That is a big one. Like, how can they use this in their career to help them? And then culture building initiatives. And I'll leave that up to you to decide that what that means to your organization. But what are you doing to foster those relationships and those cross-functional relationships as well? All right. And then I'm going to leave you with a few key takeaways. And I invite you to share yours in the chat as well. What's something that stuck out to you today that either A, you want to apply, or B, you want to go get more information about? When I think about this whole presentation, the key takeaways for me are everboarding is going to provide that continuous support for your organization. It's stop thinking about just onboarding and just thinking about everboarding. How do we make this a seamless transition into the next phase of their employee journey? Second thing is, how can I get managers more involved? And I actually would say more engaged. How do we get them to participate, not just get bought into what we're doing, but how do we get them to participate in what we're providing? That manager voice. Third, prioritizing communication. It is so important to make sure, and we're not pointing the finger, we're not confused as to why something didn't get done. And then lastly is take a step back. Assess what you're currently doing today and decide if there's opportunities for improvement. And it might be starting with a SWOT analysis, or it might be starting with a survey to those who support new hire experiences. All right. I'm going to pause, make sure there's no last questions. Again, if you want to share a takeaway in the chat of just something you would like to implement or learn more about, I would really appreciate understanding what resonated with you today.
Amber, we actually did get a really good question in the Q&A
Hmm.
section. It's a bit lengthy, so buckle up, okay?
All right. All right.
Aaron asked, surveys are follow-ups at 30, 60, 90, or even 120 days are pretty common when
Yep.
evaluating the new hire experience. Personally, I think there's value in going beyond those traditional checkpoints, whether through surveys or in-person feedback. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, what are the pros and cons of implementing a longer term feedback approach? For example, checking in with employees who've been there for a year. What kept them there? How well did onboarding prepare them? And what insights can we gain from their experience? Basically, I'd love your thoughts on gathering feedback for new hires well past the usual timeline.
Absolutely. Okay, so there are a few things that I would recommend. And again, it goes back to who cares about this, and that's who you need to bring into the room. Um, there, there is an opportunity a lot of times for senior leaders to bring in people who have started within the last 18, we would say 12 to 24 months, like just to kind of capture everybody who's been there at least a year. Those are the people that we typically stop asking. Right? If you think about maybe what's set up in your organization, there's always this gap between the 12-month mark and the 24, maybe even 36 month or 30-month mark. not quite 3 years. Senior leaders can invite them in and do more of like a roundtable. Like, we want to hear from you. Where can the company improve? Having that FaceTime with them. I've been in one where the CEO ran it. I've been in one where a CRO, CHRO, COO. I mean, it really just means whoever cares should be conducting it. The other thing that you should consider is, if you already have an annual engagement survey, what came out of that and what can you do every quarter to make improvements? Like, what were the big things that got identified? Bring your employees into the conversation. Allow people to sign up and say, and you'll have to like cap it on how many people can participate. But having them raise their hand and say, I want to participate in a focus group that is catered around how we celebrate recognition, or not celebrate, but how we give recognition in the organization. We have a vast improvement to be made. Great. We'll create a focus group around it. They might have to apply, it's up to you. And then put their voice in it. And every quarter, then you do like a pulse survey type concept to understand, did we move the needle? Did we make improvements? And getting their opinion. But not only should you ask, you should also show you heard them, and you should take action on it if you're going to ask. So there's a couple of them, but like I said, C-suite or senior executives, it doesn't have to be CEO level. Anybody again who cares about the problem, and allow them to voice it upward. And it's not their manager. So those are my initial thoughts around that. But I'd love, again, those are my experiences. So
Perfect. We got another quick question from Robert who asks, how would you recommend we collect data on the success of the onboarding process?
Okay. I actually have an article coming out with ATD Magazine on this. I think it's coming out in January, but it is about new hire metrics. It's also in my book. Like, what metrics are we looking at for new hires versus tenured employees? Number one, and I say this to every client that I work with, is, I'm sure that they told you time to ramp is always like, here's the KPI that that role has at, whatever level they were hired for. Here's the KPI. This is what they should be at. And once they start hitting that number and they've consistently done it for 3 months, they are ramped. I would argue that depends on the time of the year they were hired. And some people don't get set up for success depending if they're hired in December. In some companies, that's like you're basically behind for the next 3 months and it stinks. But I would instead take a look at the average rate of productivity for the team that they were hired for and the role that they were hired for. And to me, that's new hire metric number one. That's how we know when they are ramped, is when they are at the average for the team, not necessarily the pretty KPI that's hanging over their head. That's more realistic, and that accounts for seasonal changes and such. The other thing I would look at is their cohort, and I would share, here are the behaviors. So the KPIs are outcomes, right? Here are the behaviors that the rest of the team is doing. Maybe it could be calls or emails. It could be resolution with customers. It could be a number of things like cases, like number of time that they spent on a case. There's all different things, but taking a look at those and across the new hire journey, and then sharing, like, here's how they compared to their peers in the same line of business. There's also engagement. I hate to say it, but we should be measuring engagement with new hires as well. So that's a survey. That could be just firsthand feedback from the manager. There's a number of things that go into new hire metrics, but they should not be just the KPIs that the role was hired for. It needs to be behaviors, because behaviors lead to outcomes. And if you're new and you're learning, the only thing you can control is your attitude and your effort, and finding a way to measure that. So hopefully that helps a little bit too.
Awesome. That was the last question I saw come in.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a couple things in here. And then, yeah, I do present a lot of the industry conferences, like Training Magazine, some of the ATD events, the big international one for ATD. So, absolutely. Hopefully, I can see some of you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Such an active chat section. So much good information sharing happening there. Amber, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be such a good session. We appreciate sharing all of those insights and tips.